The camera, is it on? Are you sure?
Camera's definitely on now.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of the Planco podcast. I'm Max, and today we're recording at the Eat Well restaurant in Dubai. Do come here, check them out. They have their own meal plans, and also they have another branch in DIFC. We're in Udmeta, so do come here. I'll put links down below. And also do come for their Friday brunch that I have tried myself and I can vouch for. So we'll put links to all of that down below. Do check it out. But today's guest, personal trainer and plant-based nutritionist, founder of the Switch Up program that we'll get into more about in a minute. You can find it on our website, www.Emmanuelle.com, and you can find it on Instagram at Emmanuelle Bonham. Emmanuelle, welcome to the Planco podcast.
You stalked me.
I did stalk you. I'm sure I'm not your only stalker. I've got to do a little bit of research to look professional, you know? I mean, I can't just wing absolutely everything that I do.
True story. No, thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, it's actually the second time we're having a conversation, as we had one last Thursday at the Dubai Vegan Community event. If you're not a member of the Dubai Vegan Community yet, do come and join us.
Why?
Yeah, probably because they're not in Dubai. But if you're in Dubai, vegan or vegan curious, come and join us at our events. There'll be links to that as well. So, Emmanuelle, let's start off with the main question that you get every day of your life. Why did you go vegan?
Oh, that's a good one. I was on and off vegetarian for a long time, maybe like 6 years. I never, like when I was living on my own, when I left home, I would never buy meat and cook it. Like it just wasn't something that I was interested in. It just didn't feel the need to like buy meat, even when I wasn't vegetarian or vegan. I just kind of steered away from it. I didn't really like it that much. Anyway, so then I went vegetarian, and obviously I wasn't eating meat, but because I was into fitness like in a big way and the gym, I was eating a lot of eggs, protein shakes. I wasn't eating milk because I'm lactose intolerant. But yeah, I was still eating that stuff. And then maybe like 2.5 years ago, I started seeing like a lot of stuff on Instagram that I wasn't cool with. Like I started seeing, like cows being slaughtered and just animal cruelty that I just was like, oh my God, this is actually a thing. I had no idea that this was happening. And then, when you see that like first gory video, you're like, it's like a wake up call. You're like, right, never again. Like I'm stopping, like I'll never eat that again. I'll never eat anything dairy or meat. Anyway, so that maybe.
So you kind of went cold tofu.
Yeah. Because I was like, I wasn't drinking milk, and I wasn't really, as I said, eating meat anyway. It was maybe the occasional like egg or fish or whatever. But my diet was pretty plant-based, like anyway. And so it was like that for a couple of months, or maybe even a month, 6 weeks. And then I realized, like, I had still been eating chocolate. So obviously most chocolate contains dairy and milk products and things like that. And I kind of like, I could say I pretended I didn't know, but I kind of did know that there was milk and stuff in it. And I kind of wasn't mentally in that stage yet to fully commit, which I think is fine. Like, as I always say to new vegans, is that you will definitely slip up and you will definitely have times where you question your choices.
Yeah, I mean, perfection is the enemy of progress. And when you try and make people perfect straight away, then it just becomes unachievable. I see that as well with the fitness world. Like, for example, you look at your Instagram account, and you look at other fitness trainers, everyone looks perfect, like so fit, so ripped and everything. And it looks almost unachievable. Yeah. Whereas it's that progress, and it's the same with veganism, step by step. Mm-hmm. But do you think going plant-based has changed you physically?
For sure. So without even trying, in maybe like 10 months from being proper plant-based, I lost like 8 kilos. And I wasn't like that big to begin with. I was maybe hovering around 62 kilos. And then without even trying, it just fell off. And maybe it was a combination of like a little bit of muscle as well as fat. But yeah, definitely like I lost a lot of weight. And I started eating more carbs, which was great because in the fitness industry and people who are trying to lose weight, a lot of the time it's like, oh my gosh, you can't eat carbs. Like it's off limits.
Yeah, that seems to be such a big taboo when it comes to the fitness world and muscle building. It's like avoid the carbs, but you can eat as much meat and saturated fat and all that stuff as you want. Because the keto diet seems to be one that comes up a lot. People on this low carb, high fat diet. Yeah. Which I find really confusing and it's no sugar as well. And they even cut out fruit. Whereas anything that cuts out fruit, it can't possibly be good for you,
Yeah.
can it? I mean, you're the nutritionist.
Yeah, keto is such a weird one because like the reason a lot of people eat meat, right, is because they say, oh, well, our ancestors did it. You know, it's something so natural, like animals in the wild do all this stuff. Like they try and make a case for it because it's something we've always done. But if you think about keto, like how is that a natural diet? None of our ancestors ever was in ketosis. It's not a natural diet for us.
I mean, how many of the hunter-gatherers 3,000 years ago were mixing butter in their coffee? I mean, the first
Probably
time I
not that
saw that, I was
many.
like, there's nothing natural about
Yeah,
that at
yeah,
all.
yeah.
Like, no one's ever done that.
And they were probably not peeing on sticks to see whether they were in ketosis.
Yeah.
So the actual like state of ketosis is very, very hard to get into. You have to stay in this state for a couple of weeks before your brain switches over. So basically the state of ketosis is when your body runs off ketones for fuel, and ketones are a byproduct of when your liver, it's basically fuel from your liver. When your liver doesn't have enough glucose or carbohydrate, it uses ketones as energy. And as I said, it's not a natural state. It puts your liver under so much stress. It's not a state that we should ever be in unless it's an extreme emergency.
Yeah.
And how, like you say, how is it healthy that you're not allowed to have fruits and even vegetables on this
They
diet?
say it's quite effective for epileptic people for some reason.
I mean,
But then that's a minority of the population.
depends
isn't
what
it?
way you look at it.
Yeah.
Like it's always a long and a short term effect that you have to take into account. So short term, there's a lot of people that swear by keto. They swear by like it for weight loss, and yeah, for sure, short term it might help you lose weight loss, just like cocaine and heroin might help you lose weight. You know, it
Yeah,
doesn't
true.
necessarily mean it's
Yeah.
healthy.
And I think that's where we need to loop back to the diet and not the lifestyle. So do you differentiate between the plant-based diet and the vegan lifestyle? And how do you compare the two?
I think they're similar and they're different. So obviously, in a plant-based lifestyle, your diet is plant-based, right? So it comes from vegetables, fruits, grains, legumes, all that stuff. The plant-based lifestyle term doesn't take into account your other ways of living. So whether you wear leather, whether you use cruelty-free cosmetics, all that. So plant-based, in my opinion, is more about the food that you eat. Whereas a vegan lifestyle is obviously abstaining from anything that has any link to animal exploitation. So they are two different things. And what I do say in the beginning is to people who want to go vegan, start with like getting your diet right, because the diet's going to be the big one. The diet's going to be the one you have to sort out most.
It's the easiest one as well, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not the most important one, but it's very fundamental that you have that down first, because there's no point in, making sure you're getting animal cruelty-free cosmetics or whatever if you're not even addressing the bigger problem, which is the food, and something that you eat. Well, everyone eats like 3, 4, 5 times a day, right? So that I think that's the
But
big
some
one.
people will choose cruelty-free cosmetics, but then they won't be vegan because, in their opinion, they're doing their part, or they won't be plant-based at least. It's real tough to find that, where some people draw that line of where do you draw that line between animal cruelty and my personal enjoyment of eating meat. And I always encourage people to do what they can and to take that step towards it. But why do you think that standard nutritionists don't recommend a plant-based diet?
Some nutritionists do. I think it's more the problem with medical professionals. So doctors who really should be, that they're trained in medicine. So what is the most effective medicine in a lot of cases? It's nutrition. But when doctors are trained, they're usually trained on pharmaceutical medicines. So what compounds in the medicine treats this, and it's very scientific. Whereas, if you speak to most doctors, they'll have a basic understanding of nutrition. You have to. But in terms of plant-based and alternative kinds of nutrition, like they're not taught that, because it's just not something that until recently has been considered the best medicine.
Yeah. I mean, prevention is the best, isn't it, really? And that's what plant-based diet does. Even though it can reverse certain diseases, if you're healthier to start with, you're not going to be treating and curing, which is what seems to be the way that we've brought the pharmaceutical industry in, and the doctors today, is they are curing diseases.
Yeah.
They're not preventing them.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit mixed up in some places, because obviously if we cure diseases, we have a disease to cure, and therefore we have pills to prescribe, and therefore we have money to make for the pharmaceutical industries. If we prevent them, we're not making these pharmaceutical industries any money. So the world can be a little bit dark in that way sometimes. Like doctors might have incentives to prescribe certain amounts of medication. And if you look closely, like a lot of these corporations and these entities are funded by pharmaceuticals, or Coca-Cola is a big one that funds a lot of research and has a part in the World Health Organization. That there's intricate ties and things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So we have to look at the whole picture, and we have to look at where the research is coming from and who's really to gain from these kinds of measures.
And ultimately, happy and healthy people don't spend money.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I got medication, like antibiotics, like not even a lozenge or something. I just never buy medication.
Yeah.
And, I like to think that I don't go to the doctor as much. We joked on Thursday about the fact that vegans never get sick, but it's like, if you're not eating a vegan diet, then you're filling your body with all these things that create free radicals and on a day-to-day basis inflammation. So your body is constantly fighting and constantly in a state of inflammation from all these toxic foods that you put in your body.
Yeah, people always love to point holes into the plant-based diet and the vegan lifestyle, but they don't like to take a look at what they're already doing. And it looks like we're going to be receiving some beautiful-looking food here.
It's like 9:15 in the morning. We're getting full restaurant stuff.
So after a short meal break, we are back.
With some good food.
What do you want to talk about? Yeah, some good food. I really like the scrambled tofu, homemade kimchi, these rolls, sun-dried. Yeah, I've been hiding that behind the plant. I was hoping you wouldn't see it. Did you not try it?
No.
Get yourself some kimchi. I did not know you hadn't tried that. It's good. We cover everything in this topic. There's food. There's talk about. Well, we're talking about nutrition, so it is absolutely relevant, isn't it? Would you recommend kimchi at 9 o'clock in the morning as a nutritionist? Yeah. As I said, it's quite healthy for your gut, so I mean, it can't be really doing any harm. A lot of people complain. Well, they don't complain. A lot of people are worried about soy, about the estrogen. What's your expert opinion on that?
I think soy is like the most just no. You don't need to worry about soy. Like, it doesn't actually contain the hormones that bring up, that trigger breast growth and female characteristics and stuff like that. It's not how soy works. Like, if you're worried about soy, then go for like a non-GMO one. But the benefits of soy are crazy. Like, it's full of protein. It's like the highest density in terms of protein out of all the nut milks. And I think it's one of the best ways to get protein in your diet. Like, I swear by soy milk, and I think it tastes better than a lot of the kind of watery ones out there. But yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, you have to look at where the research is coming from. So the research that states that, it's going to give you man boobs and it's going to increase your chance of breast cancer and all that stuff, you have to think, well,
I mean, if it increased the size of boobs, then everyone would be eating it.
Exactly, and it really doesn't. Yeah. It really doesn't, unfortunately. But yeah, it's so over. Like, if you actually, like, I've looked into the studies and I've done a lot of research on it, mainly for my own health, and none of the studies actually correlate to any negative side effects. In fact, the opposite. Like, it can help reduce like some cancers and things like that. So I would say go for it. Yeah. I mean, if like anything, if you literally just had a diet of soy, and you ate like soy breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks, then you might run into some problems. But probably out of nutritional deficiencies rather than the actual effects of too much soy.
Yeah, and people are going to tell you, oh, don't eat scrambled tofu in the morning because of soy. But then they're going to eat bacon and sausages, which are two processed meats, which are type 1 carcinogens that have been qualified by the World Health Organization. Exactly. So given the choice between soy, bacon and sausages, if you're looking from a health perspective, you can't really fight that fight, can you?
I mean, yeah, if you're eating soy bacon rather, like it's processed, so yeah, I understand why people would say, oh, soy bacon is bad, but it's so much better in comparison than pork. So, I mean, people drill into vegans about having these really unhealthy processed diets, and yes, there are some foods that we have in the vegan diet that are very processed and unhealthy, but just look at our diet. as a whole compared to
Yeah.
a meat eater's diet.
I mean, just removing dairy from your diet is already huge for most people from a health aspect, I think, because
Exactly.
dairy is linked to so many different diseases. But we tend to always turn a blind eye to that because cheese tastes so good, which it does. And I honestly miss the taste of cheese. I always liked it. And I do kind of, that's probably the only thing I actually crave. Is there anything you crave, really? Or
I mean,
actually, you were kind of gradual, weren't you, anyway? You weren't eating much meat, you weren't eating dairy anyway. So.
I'm not a massive foodie, as in I do like food, but I'm not, I don't get super excited about the idea of like going out and trying different places and things like that. I mean, I get excited when I find a vegan place because they're few and far between.
I mean, I practically live off French fries and crisps.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not exactly healthy. But on the healthier note of things, there are more and more professional athletes turning to a plant-based diet. Because there's the film coming out in September, Game Changers, which I'm looking forward to seeing.
Do you know what? I've already had people, I put something on my story about it the other day, like I'm so excited for this to come out, and I've already had people slating it, like it's not the full story, these people haven't been vegan for a long amount of time, and it's just like, just let it be. Like no one needs to be vegan for 15 years for it to be effective, you know what I mean? Like, and the research is there, and that's why we want more people to go vegan for their own health. Like you don't need to be perfect, and you don't need to have been vegan for 10-15 years. Like any excuse people have to slate vegan diet is crazy.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I always do try and break away from that. I admit, like I became vegan less than 3 years ago. I mean, I love meat. I used to work at McDonald's. Like all.
Did you?
Yeah, I got fired.
No way. What did you do?
That's a story for another day. I don't know if I should go.
No, I meant as a job.
What, working at McDonald's?
Yeah.
How many jobs can you have working at McDonald's?
I guess you just serve chicken nuggets, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Crazy.
I was quite good at making the chips.
Do you know what? I am sorry to interrupt. I was following, I can't remember which exact Instagram page it was. It was one of like the Save movement or something like that. And I came across a story of a woman who, I think she was Mexican, and she was a immigrant, slaughterhouse worker, and she turned vegan, and now she doesn't preach, I hate that word, but she's trying to show the world like compassion, and I actually DM'd her. I was like, oh my gosh, you're such an inspiration. Like the fact that A, you've switched, and B, you've had the confidence to come up and say, I am vegan, but I was doing something really, really bad, and it was really upsetting, and I think that's amazing. Like,
yeah, it is, and we need to share our stories of how we were before, and if we can change, anyone can change. I mean, hardly anyone I know only one person that was born vegan.
Yeah.
And he's been vegan for 63 years, and then he's like an ultra athlete. I mean, he's like an exception, one in a million. Most people, it's gradual. It's through their education as well.
I was talking to a group the other day, and I was at my pool, and it was like a group of people that were there, and one of the guys actually was vegan, and we were having a conversation. He suddenly became like the center of attention. When a guy like admits he's vegan, all his friends are like, oh. And this other guy was saying, oh, fuck that, like, fuck being vegan. And I'm like, mate, you don't have a choice. Like, if you want somewhere for your grandchildren to live, and you want somewhere even for your children to live, it's not just as simple as saying, oh, fuck that, I wouldn't be vegan. It's, no, you need to be vegan. Yeah. Like, you need to start.
It's true, we haven't
vegan.
covered the environmental aspect of it, but animal agriculture is the leading cause of deforestation and destruction of our waters and the planet that we are leaving behind for our children. And how can you say, oh, I don't want to be vegan and still want to have kids? Like, what are you leaving behind?
Or, have a dog, which a lot of people do, oh, fuck the environment, and I don't care about being vegan, but I'll love my dog and I'll treat him like, no other animal that I'd ever treat. Yeah. So it's twisted and blurred lines, I think, and I think people need to actually realize what's happening. They're doing these, it's anonymous for the voiceless, they're doing these boxes around.
Cube of Truth.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great idea. Yeah. Like, I know it's kind of in your face, but I think that's kind of how it needs to be.
That's what I'm doing next week.
Yeah.
In New York. It'll be amazing. Yeah, it's a week-long cube. Actually, by the time this episode's been released, it'll be past. But then you'll know more about how it was, because I'm about to be putting as much as I can live on Instagram and stuff like that. And so cool. I do think it's great, and I think street-based activism is great. People do need to see what's going on. It is very much in your face, and people do tend to be afraid of that. But everyone needs that shock, first of all, to start thinking.
I think there's different ways of doing it. So vegans get a bit of a bad reputation for being very, very preachy. And there's ways of doing it, like the box ways, where we're basically we're not preaching. We're just standing, you will be standing there with a box. You're not forcing your ideals on someone else, but you're just showing people what's happening. there was something I saw the other day. I think it was a PETA campaign where someone dressed as a rabbit and they went around a busy city and they started pulling people's hair out. Like they just went up to them and pulled their hair out behind. And I think ways like that, you're not getting the message through. You're just going to get really angry people. So there's a lot of ways that we enhance our reputation and can
I mean, I'm vegan. I wouldn't want someone to pull my hair out, to be honest.
Exactly. And they might be pulling people's hair out that are already vegan. I think it was actually a campaign against like Angora and fur and things like that.
Okay.
But you don't necessarily, like not everyone, a lot of people disagree with fur. Probably more people disagree with fur than more people are vegan. So going around and pulling people's hair, it's like, hold on, yeah, but I disagree with fur, so why are you pulling my hair?
Yeah.
You know, there's ways of doing it that help us get more people to be vegan, and then there's ways that separate us from non-vegans and vegans, and we really don't want that, because that puts us in a position where not only do we have to convince someone to go vegan, but we also have to get on their good side, because now they hate us.
Yeah, and I think the way that you do it, I don't know if it's on purpose or not, is that you're a personal trainer, you're a nutritionist, you're very healthy. It's very inspiring to see like everything that you do, and you don't have
Apart
to.
from the pizzas at the weekend.
Well, what's wrong with pizza? And you
It's
don't
freedom,
harm
it's fine.
animals in the process, which is the most important thing, to show that you can be fit, you can be well. And I think that's important to first of all lead by example, like you're doing, and then open that conversation as well. Then maybe not be pulling people's hair out straight away.
I mean, I've always loved animals. So, you know, my dad used to have a shoot, we would call them in Scotland, you know, where it's a game shooting. So you get your friends together, you breed the birds, and you go out and shoot them, and it's a sport. And you know what? I was so conditioned to it from a young age that I would, once the round is done and all the birds have flown over, the pickers go up and collect the dead birds. And I was so, thinking back at it now, I haven't really thought about it, but I was so conditioned. Like I would pick these birds up by the neck. I'd literally have like 7 in each hand. Their bodies would still be warm. They'd be bleeding. And I was like 10, 11, maybe even younger. And I didn't think anything of it. And now, like, it would literally, if I was in that position and my dad had that shoot, I would be like fighting against him, because like I'm educated now, and I know that that's not right. Like you can't, like, I mean, you can do it, but why would you want to?
Yeah. I mean, when you're young, it's normalized for us.
Yeah, exactly.
People show us, and we believe what adults, they show us, yeah, it's fine to treat your dog like a best friend, and then consider a pig, a cow, a bird like absolutely nothing, just a commodity.
I mean, I was never allowed animals when I was growing up, because A, we moved around so much, and B, I practically lived in a show house, because every year we'd move on, and, you know, so I was never allowed a dog or anything like that. But, you know, I remember my parents saying, if I asked them, I remember saying I wanted to be like vegetarian when I was like 7 or something, because I found out that animals are killed for meat, and I didn't understand it before. And my dad would just say to me, that's life, like that's what happens, and you accept that because that's what you're told by your parents. But then actually, as you grow older, you start to realize that that's not the only way, and it doesn't have to be like that. And yes, the world is a very dark place, and when you're a vegan, you see that more and more and more. It doesn't have to be like that, and there's ways that we can try and change that.
I agree 100% on that. So why do you think people get into veganism?
There can be many ways. So people might get into it, like probably you and me got into it for ethical reasons, and the fact that they don't agree with exploitation of animals. Maybe they've gone to a specific holistic doctor that said, look, I think that you need to manage your cholesterol or limit your heart disease, a doctor that has a clue and knows what they're talking about in terms of nutrition. And they might have said, because I was a bit harsh earlier when I said medical professions jump on pharmaceuticals. Some doctors do suggest a plant-based option, but the majority don't. The majority look to pharmaceuticals. Anyway, so a doctor might have said, you know, adopt a plant-based diet. It's going to be better for your heart, for your arteries, all that. Or a lot of people are intrigued in veganism because of how the media portray it. So the media portray sometimes like, oh, veganism's this amazing diet. You'll drop like 10 pounds in a day. You'll like be healthy for the rest of your life. You'll never get any diseases. It's fabulous. You'll be like 100 and climbing mountains, all this stuff.
I agree with that. Totally sold on that propaganda.
Exactly. And I think some people go into it for the weight loss reasons. So obviously a lot of the proportion in the Western world is overweight and has diabetes. So people think, oh, veganism, it's this new diet. I haven't tried it before. I've exhausted all my other options with diets. Maybe I'll try it and see if I lose weight. And with any dieting, there is that scope or that opportunity for eating disorders to develop, because when you're so focused on losing weight, it can become obsessive. You can kind of feel a lot of self-hate if you're not getting to your goals when you want to. You know, you're tired, you're drained from a lack of calories. It can be quite a nasty place to be. So if you're going into the veganism diet as a weight loss kind of idea, then I don't think that's the right way, because there's so many great health benefits, and yes, you might lose a lot of excess body fat from being on a vegan diet, but if you're going on it solely for that, you're not reaping the benefits, and you're not getting in the right mindset for it.
Right. Is that by just making yourself calorie deficient, you mean?
Yeah. So obviously in a vegan diet, the vast majority of your calories are going to come from fruits, vegetables, legumes, things like that. But it's one of the most restrictive diets that we have. So obviously the more that you breed and encourage restrictivism, I don't know, is that a word? Restrictivism. Restriction.
Restriction
Yeah,
sounds better.
I had to go back to school.
Wow, that's a lot of syllables in that one.
The more that you encourage that, and the more limits you put on someone's diet, what they can and can't eat, the more obsessive it can get, and the more kind of confused and
But do you really find a plant-based diet restrictive, though?
No, I don't find it restrictive at all. I find it less restrictive than a meat-based diet, because you're forced to include more things that you wouldn't eat. But the media portrays it as a restrictive diet. And for these purposes, we'll just call it a restricted diet, because you're restricting meat, eggs, dairy. But no, I feel the opposite.
So I find the standard diet restrictive, because it's literally meat, potatoes, and 3 vegetables. And that is the basis of every meal that you eat. And if you can't think about a meal that doesn't involve one of 4 dead animals, that is restrictive.
Definitely. In case you're not from the UK, we have this idea for our meals that it should be like meat and 2 veg. So meat is the centerpiece. Like, meat is what it all revolves around. And maybe this comes from after the World War II, when obviously meat and a lot of other things were rationed. So, you know, now that when the war stopped, now that it wasn't rationed, everyone was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, great, let's go crazy on it. And I think it kind of just stemmed from there. Because it's definitely not from human needs. We definitely don't need meat at every meal. So I think it was kind of a craze of actually being able to eat meat again, and the demand for it. But yeah, in the UK, the diet predominantly revolves around, you know, your meat and your veg. And your veg are kind of, the veg are just a side thing. Like, no one really wants to eat the veg. You just eat the veg because you think you should eat the veg. Whereas if we look at...
It's just there for colour, really, isn't it?
Exactly. And because we have to, or we think we have to. Whereas in other cuisines, if you look at Asian or Italian, for example, you know, you'll have full dishes that won't even have meat, or sometimes even dairy. Like, you might have pizza, or you might have pastas, you know, tomato pastas, or you might have, in an Asian diet, you might have soups or tofu or...
According to my Italian friends, a pizza should not have meat on it, a standard pizza. So technically, a pizza should be vegetarian. And there shouldn't be pineapple on it as well, but that's just...
I love pineapple on pizza, but you know, one of my worst things about
They're probably going to
pizza...
listen to this, and all respect they had for you is going to go straight out the window.
I mean,
like it as well, to be honest.
You can edit that out, it's fine. I don't like pizza when there's too much going on. Like, it should be, you know, cheese-based, vegan cheese, of course, maybe tomato, and maybe some, like a sprinkle of some herbs, and maybe a veg or 2, but none of this, like, pepperoni, meat, chicken. You get, like, 4 cheese, 4 meat pizzas, and it's like, whoa, like, hold on a second.
Yeah, like,
I can't taste one of them.
Yeah.
Like, so how do you expect me to taste, like, all 6 of them?
Yeah. But I think with the meat thing, like you said, after the war, meat was a luxury product, and most people weren't eating meat.
Yeah.
And then we wanted to make this luxury to become a day-to-day thing. We wanted it more and more. As we do as humans, we always want more of something. And now we've put it to a point where you can't imagine a meal without it. And most people can't. So how would you suggest people transition to a plant-based diet? Because there are probably some people out there that are still listening who've watched us eat all this delicious vegan food provided by Eat Well. I will put the links down below, as I said.
Yum.
And they're like, oh, I can do that if I'm eating blueberry cheesecake every day. But how would you suggest people approach going plant-based?
In terms of meal prepping, there's 2 different ways you can do it. I like to look at meal prepping as, don't replace and substitute. So for example, if you have your meat and 2 veg, don't try and find a substitute for the meat and the side items. Like think of your meals as a collection of lots of different things. So you've got like your base, so maybe that's kale or lettuce or whatever it is, that's going to form like a bulk of the meal, vegetables, whatever. Then you've got kind of your filler, so that might be quinoa, rice, or any other grains, potatoes. Then, you know, your protein in inverted commas, your tofu, your seitan, your chickpeas, whatever it is. Then you've got your sprinkles on the top. So your avocado, your nuts, your seeds, your whatever it is. So instead of thinking, oh, I've got to find a main event every single meal, you think, oh, I can add loads of little different things in. It's going to be loads of nice flavors. It's not going to be boring.
So instead of making it a one-man show, you make it a bit of a team play.
Exactly. I mean, that's how I like to do things. However, if you know you're going to struggle with that, then you can find substitutes. So you can be like, oh, instead of my steak, I'm going to have tofu or whatever, or sweet potato or whatever. But I think that's, again, like we went back to in the beginning, it's very restrictive because you're putting a lot of pressure on one item to do the job that the meat was going to do before. And let's be honest, it's not going to, because tofu is not meat and it never will be. So,
thankfully.
You know, I think changing the way of thinking, rather than thinking one main item, a couple of things around the outside. Let's take the focus away from one main event and just think, how many different things can we bring into this meal?
Yeah.
And the more sources and the more variety you have, the healthier you're going to be, because the wider your nutrition is going to be.
Yeah, I recently released an episode with Bruno from My Vegan Date, and his approach was very interesting. It kind of was similar to the way you were mentioning it. He mentioned crowding your plate, basically. So instead of like you remove that one item and you're like, now what do I do? You just add as much as you can to it, and so many different food types. Obviously, you need to consider the nutrients and where you're going to get them from, because that is an important aspect. And a lot of people do say they feel weak after going vegan because they're doing it wrong. It's hard. You have to re-educate yourself completely to the way you approach food. And I have one last question for you, and I can't believe I haven't asked you this before, considering that you are a PT and nutritionist. It's like, where do you get your protein from?
I mean, that's a really good question.
I mean, we might as well get this right once and for all.
I've never been asked it before in my life. I might just buy a t-shirt that's actually, do you know what? I saw a t-shirt on Instagram earlier that it had at the top, where do I get my protein from? And there was literally like 5 columns of like protein rich foods.
Really?
And I feel like I'm gonna get that and I'm just gonna wear it to every like time I ever go outside. So I touched on this the other day at the vegan event that we did with Dubai Vegan Community.
Because the question came up then as well, I think, didn't it?
I mean, it always comes up. There's never a time where it doesn't
But there's an
come up.
obsession with protein in the world that we live in.
Yes, an obsession with
No one cares about fiber. No one cares about vitamin D. No one really cares about calcium. But protein is the only thing people ever want to talk about.
Yeah. We really, really, really do not need that much protein. Like, and the more protein we have, the more at risk we are for heart disease, like diabetes. Every health condition you can probably imagine is caused by excess protein, because when we have too much protein, we're putting the body again in a state of inflammation. The body's very acidic. It produces free radicals. Free radicals go crazy. Then we start getting tumors involved. Then we keep feeding them with this aggressive acidic environment, and the tumors keep growing. So first things first, let's just get this down to one point, is that we don't need that much protein. So unless you're a serious bodybuilder, then your protein needs are going to be fairly low. So around 0.9 grams per kilo of body weight.
Okay.
For meat eaters, the guideline is about 0.8, but because plant protein is very slightly harder to digest than meat protein, the guidelines say kind of 0.9 per kilo of body weight. For men and women, it works out the same. If you're wanting to put on muscle, you know, if you're hitting the gym, you're doing that strength training, hypertrophy
everyone thinks
training,
they're a bodybuilder these days, don't they?
between 1.3 and 1.7 max. You don't need any more than that. Any more than that, you're not going to absorb. It's just going to be excreted and you're wasting. So now that we've established that we don't need that much protein, we kind of think, what other foods found naturally that have protein in? And a lot of vegetable matter contains protein. Like soybeans, for one, are such a good source. You can get soya in faux meats, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend all the time, but it's an option. Tofu, soy protein powder, edamame. There's lots of different ways you can have it.
And that's without the saturated fats, the salts, and all of the hormones that you'd be getting from a meat-based protein as well.
And then you've got your legumes, you've got your, your chickpeas, your lentils, your beans, all those kind of things that are very high in protein. People don't know how high they are in protein. So chickpeas are ridiculously high in protein. Like, they're so good. I make sure that I always have chickpeas every day, whether it's hummus, whether it's in my salads or whatever. They're just great. And they're fairly low calorie as well for what they are.
And they're a good source of iron or
Exactly.
calcium or both or something.
I think just go as natural as you can. Like, there's a reason that we have all these fruits and vegetables and grains and seeds and nuts and things that have exactly what we need. It's not just by mistake that they're there. We don't need to go around killing animals to get that. We have everything we need right in front of us.
And what's your point of view of like protein shakes? Because everyone seems to have protein shakes, be it plant-based or not. Even I have a pea protein one that I often have with me in case I can't find food. At least it's some form of food
They're
to keep me going.
As well, because they take up this much space in your luggage, and you just have water. So I used to be a big protein fanatic. This is before I properly understood protein, because everyone's telling you need protein shakes, right? After and before the gym. So obviously you go out and buy them. What you don't realize is you're really just being sold a product that you definitely don't need, and a lot of time it's filled with sugars, additives,
and your body can't assimilate all of that amount of protein in that amount of time.
Exactly.
I was reading that it can only assimilate X amount of protein per hour. So if you're chugging a protein shake, you're just going to literally pee it out in about an hour.
And protein shakes tend to be around 20 to 25 grams of protein, because that tends to be the max that people can absorb. But you'll get mass gainers that are like 40, 50, 60 grams of protein, and it's like, why? Like, you're going to take a third of that and then you're just going to waste the rest. But shakes in general, I used to have them. I haven't touched a protein shake in about 2 years. Because I like my calories to come from actual food. So when a food is in its natural form, and it's with the fiber and it's with everything else that it came from, it's going to be absorbed and digested properly. When it's isolated and it doesn't have the enzymes with it that it needs to be digested, then it's when it can start causing problems in the body. It places your liver under a lot of pressure. The foods come in a package. So you've got your fiber, you've got your sugars, you've got your enzymes within that, all that stuff to be broken down. The minute you start isolating things is where we get a problem, because it's unnatural and the body sees it, and it's like, well, how do I digest this? If I digest this, I'm looking for this and I don't know which enzyme to use. And it's just, we don't need to be ingesting powders and stuff. The only time I would say that it's a plus is that if, for example, you are looking to maintain or build muscle mass and you're having a struggle, then fine, because at the end of the day it is a food. But I wouldn't rely on them, and I wouldn't hold a special place in your diet for them. As always, try and get your foods in over your shakes and your beverages and your processed stuff. At the end of the day, protein powder is still processed.
Keep as whole food as possible.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's what I recommend on a plant-based diet. And I have clients, obviously, who are meat eaters, and it's the same advice throughout. Like, keep your food whole, natural. Don't take out anything. Don't start adding, bits in that have been taken out and mess with. Go as natural as you can.
Yeah. Do you suggest a plant-based diet to your clients?
I'm a bit careful with this, because unless someone comes to me and they say I want a plant-based diet, I don't openly suggest it. And there's a reason why, is that I don't want to be that person who tries to make people vegan.
It literally says in your bio on Instagram, plant-based. There's no secret. You don't exactly hide it.
But I don't want anyone to come to me and feel like they've turned vegan. If they don't come to me wanting to be vegan, then they're not ready, and that's fine. Like, so many people aren't interested, and it's not my job to, if I'm training them, it's not my job. I'll maybe plant a couple of seeds, and I'll speak honestly about my experience, but it's not my job to try and convince someone to go plant-based, because if I do that, they need to figure out for themselves. Like, everyone who's turned vegan didn't do it because someone told them that it was the right way. Maybe someone did tell them it was the right way, but also they went through that journey and figured it out for themselves. I can't tell someone to go vegan. Like, it's not going to work.
And if you tell someone what to do, they're not going to do it anyway.
Exactly.
I barely listen to my own advice. I'm not going to listen to someone else's.
I do have plant-based clients, and I do have people who are inspired to try it, and they've come to me because of that. But I think the way, when you start training as well properly, it's a big shock to your body.
Right.
So when you start doing a proper training program, you start good nutrition, it's enough just to kind of get that under your wing before you start changing your diet drastically or undertaking a new lifestyle. because I'm a big believer of doing stuff properly. So either just stick to what you're doing and get half of it right before attacking the next half. You know, make sure you're happy with how you're doing things. And then we can progress and we can move on. If people are interested in a vegetarian or veganism diet, just get one sorted first. Because if they start a training program, start a plant-based nutrition program, it's like, whoa.
Yeah, it's a
and
lot,
they might
isn't
crash.
it? Yeah.
And most of these people still have full-time jobs, so they're under a lot of stress. The last thing they want to be doing is in a position where they've got nothing to eat because they can't eat that because it's not plant-based, but they've got to go hit a really hard gym session. It's just baby steps. And then when you're ready to get to that plant-based lifestyle, then fine. But there is no rush because we want it to be for the long term. We don't want people dipping in and out of it. So when you're ready, when you're finally like accepting that it's the right thing to do and you believe it in your heart, then yeah, we can attack it then. But in the meantime, I'm not going to be like, I can't work with you unless you're vegan. It's just impractical.
Yeah, it would be daft of you to turn away clients just on that sole basis. But it's good that you're inspiring them and you are planting those seeds.
Yeah, I mean, I also I have to say again as well that I wasn't when I trained and qualified as a personal trainer, and for a long time after, I was not vegan. It was the opposite. I was eating a lot of meat. So my knowledge, I have a lot of knowledge in nutrition on kind of a carnivore's diet, and I know how it works, and I know how to get the best results on a carnivore diet. So that is still very relevant. I don't want to just not use that. You know, I learned so much, and there are ways that you can create an amazing physique if you're eating like a carnivore. It's just not the way I choose.
No one doubts that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the way it's been for decades, but it's just that now there's another way.
Yeah.
And that's healthier.
Yeah, exactly. The health aspect of it as well is that if you're eating massive amounts of meat and stuff, long term, you might have a great body.
Even Schwarzenegger was talking about it in Game Changers. He's talking about the plant-based protein. And so, I mean, if he's like the icon of fitness for this century, probably.
Well, not fitness, bodybuilding.
Well, fitness,
difference.
Difference. I think that's an episode for a different day, actually.
I'm so excited for that to come out. I can't even tell you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I mean, we're going to be doing a screening of it actually with the Dubai vegan community. So
just wait for the backlash. Just wait for the backlash.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to criticize it. But anyway, if any of you do want to meet Emmanuelle and you do want her to be your PT, do check her out. Like I mentioned earlier, there will be links to her website, www.emmanuellebonham.com, and on Instagram @EmmanuelleBonham. All of it in the links somewhere down there. Right now, I want to eat my cake. So,
I'm surprised I haven't eaten it for you already.
Yeah, I'm just like looking at it. I'm like, okay. So let's just wrap this up. Emmanuelle, thank you for talking to me. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for letting me come on your amazing, famous show.
Well, it better be more famous with you on it now. With your 35,000 followers that'll be wanting to eat this cake. So thank you for joining me. Tune in next week for another episode of The Plant Cake. I'm still thinking about cake now. The Plant Cake.
Please keep that as your new name.
Welcome
Rebrand.
to The Plant Cake. Rebrand totally. Starts today. The Plant Cake podcast is back. Maybe that will work. Anyway, I'm going to leave now. So thanks for joining us. Have a great day and see you next week for another episode of The Plant Cake podcast. Such an idiot.